Hey guys, Tommy here. Today we're going to go over how to install our body mount chop on the new 2021 Ford Bronco. This body mount chop is going to allow you to fit much larger tires. Alright, so we've already installed one side onto the Bronco, so we're going to show you what one half of the kit looks like, all the parts for one side. So right here we have our high clearance body mount that's going to replace the old one. Over here we have our two plates that are going to move the inner fender liner back on the rear side of the wheel well to clear your tires on that side. The tools that you're going to need for this job are going to be an impact to remove your wheel lug nuts and just make everything faster, but we have our 13mm socket, 15mm socket, 18mm and 19mm socket. We're going to need a pair of needle nose pliers, a trim tool, a Phillips screwdriver, and a 15mm ratcheting wrench is ideal. A non-ratcheting one will work too. All right, so now with a Phillips screwdriver and a 7mm socket, which I forgot to mention earlier in the video, we're going to remove the inner fender liner. Now these rivets, you have to very carefully unthread them without pushing on the screwdriver, if that makes sense. Ford really didn't want these liners to come out, so there's a lot of them. All right, so once you've gotten all of your Phillips head clips out of the fender liner, make sure you've gotten all of them before you start pulling on stuff. But the next step is we're going to take our trim panel tool and remove these last two Christmas tree clips up towards the front body mount here. Pop. All right, so now with those last two clips removed, this whole inner fender liner can come out. You're gonna have to wrestle it a little bit, but it is pretty flexible, so. All right, so now that you've got your inner fender liner out, you have full access to your front body mount and then your rear mount here, as well as the structure that's behind the fender liner. All right, so for the next step, we're gonna remove our front skid plate and our bumper. And how we're gonna do that, we're gonna use our 15mm socket and an impact. There's 4 bolts that mount this skid plate on, so we'll go under here. And the rear bolts, you don't want to remove all the way. You just loosen them and unthread them so there's wiggle room, basically. But there we go. So now that those are removed, when you remove this front one, it'll support the rear of the skid plate so you don't drop it and you can remove it by yourself. There we go. Once you got your skid plate removed, you're going to want to remove your bumper. So you want to start by taking these pop rivets out. There's two panels around your tow hooks here that cover your mounting bolts. So we're going to take our needle nose pliers, grab these rivets by the head, pull them out, and then the clip should come out after the rivet pulls through. Now with these rivets removed, these plastic pieces are just clipped in, so you just got to give them a tug and they should pop off and uncover your bolts to remove your bumper. All right, so now that you've got the covers off, you're going to want to grab a buddy to support one end of the bumper as you take off these 6 bolts that hold it on. Oh, and you're going to want to use your 15mm socket for that. All right, so for the next step, you don't have to, but you can remove this piece out of the frame. These bolts are 15mm bolts, so you'll use your wrench here, your 15mm wrench for that. We're not going to, it's not necessary, but you can if you want to. After that, we're going to move down to this intercooler mount here. Intercooler mount and skid plate mount. You want to do this part only one side at a time, because if you remove both of them, your intercooler will just dangle and it probably won't hurt anything, but better to be safe than sorry. So these 2 bolts here are 15mm, so we're going to grab our impact. Just wiggle this off the bottom of the intercooler here. There you go. All right, so the next step is going to be taking out your body mount bolt. And so the body mount bolt is actually up through this hole down here, and you're going to need an 18mm socket, most likely a deep well. And so we're gonna remove that bolt and the lower part of the body mount bushing here. And then that will free this up for when we support the body before cutting this off. You've got to work your finger around there and just kind of pull that down and out of there. There we go, lower bushing out. And that sleeve and top bushing you can get out after the whole thing's off the vehicle. All right, the next step after you got your body mount bolt out and lower bushing off is to support the front of the body to lift the weight off of the upper bushing. If you see here, we have a small gap that indicates that we have no more weight on that body mount. The way we supported it was we put our jack under here on the core support, so this red tube goes all the way through to the other side. That was a good spot for us. If you have a better way you want to do it, that's all up to you. The important thing is that you support the weight of the cab and get the weight off of this body mount so there's no weight on it anymore. All right, so the next step after you have your body supported, you're gonna cut this off. So this whole frame piece is held on by this one tube here. It's about a 2" by 2" square tube, and you can fit a Sawzall blade behind it quite easily. One thing to point out is that if you are uncomfortable cutting your frame by any means or using any of these tools, make sure you take it to a professional shop to do it. If you line this up wrong, you could damage your radiator that's right up here, which would be another expensive repair bill that's unnecessary. Make sure you wear all the proper PPE and get yourself a brand new Sawzall blade, because these frames can be kind of tough steel to cut through. So here we go. All right, so now that you got your front body mount cut off, we're gonna move back to this rear mount here. And the first thing we're gonna do is remove this bar. So you'll need your 15mm ratcheting wrench. And you can come in here and get these bolts loose. There we go. And you can discard this bar and these bolts. You won't be using them anymore. And now we'll be removing this structure that goes behind the inner fender here. You'll need an M13 or a 13mm socket to remove these. So we'll go in here. And these bolts have Loctite on them, so they will come out hard all the way. There you go. Once you have those 3 bolts out, you'll have to kind of jimmy this a little bit. There's a tab. There we go. See, this tab goes in that hole up there, so if you don't lift it up and pull out, you're gonna have a hard time getting it off. But yeah, that's removed, and now we'll get ready to cut this bracket off of the frame. All right, so to get ready to cut this bracket off, we're going to need to take our ABS sensor here and unplug it. There we go. And then now you're gonna take your trim tool and pop a few Christmas tree clips out. Get under there. There we go. This one back here. One more on the frame for this wiring harness. And then one on the front of this body mount back here. And then another one on the back side of this body mount. It's gonna be hard to see, but right where my finger's at. And pop those out. Now you can move this whole wiring harness assembly. Give it a little bit of flex there. Move that whole assembly out of the way. Probably need to take like a zip tie or something and hold it back so it's not gonna flop into your path of cutting. When you're cutting off this bracket on the driver's side particularly, you gotta watch out for this harness as well as your brake lines. You don't wanna nick any of those while you're cutting this off. All right, so now that you've cut both of those brackets off, it's time to either clean them up. I like to do that personally. I like to clean them up, get all the burrs off of them, the front one and the rear one, and then get them ready for paint just to prevent them from rusting. For this front one, it is important that your chopped off piece sticks out no further than ½ an inch. If it sticks out further than that, then you're gonna have to grind it down because the bracket won't fit correctly. Just make that note. But yeah, just grab a grinder with a flap wheel is my preferred method, clean these up, and then get them ready for paint. All right, so now that you've got your frame brackets chopped off and painted, we're gonna start reassembling. So we're going to take your wiring harness that you unclipped and pulled to the side and put it back on the same way it was in there. Make sure to get all of the Christmas tree clips back through their holes. So now that we have the wiring harness back in place, we're gonna start installing our brackets that replace that plastic framework that was here. So this first little one, use the factory bolt and stick it on the outside here. And then you're gonna use your 13mm socket. And then we're gonna grab our other bracket that uses the other two factory bolts that we already took off. Put those back through here, same 13mm socket, and we'll get them started first. All right, and to tighten this down, you're gonna use your 13mm socket. And all right, and we'll get back to that side later when we put the inner fender liner in. In the next step, we're going to take our 15mm ratcheting wrench and loosen this top bolt here, or this bolt on top of the frame here. All right, so now that you've gotten that top bolt out, we're gonna take the new body mount and install the top bushing only before we slide it in there. So now this whole assembly, you can just slide right above the aluminum plate, slide it in there like that. And now we're gonna get this bolt, which is kind of tricky to get in. You gotta put it in at an angle first, but once you get it through the hole and started, you can start it with your fingers. And then you're gonna wanna thread this bolt in pretty much until it contacts the new bracket, but don't tighten it with a wrench yet. All right, so once you've gotten your body mount onto the frame with that top bolt inserted, you're gonna wanna take the bushing off of the bottom of the intercooler. We have a spacer that's gonna go on top of it. So you kind of just gotta wiggle it and pull it off pretty tight on there. And then the new spacer just goes on top of it like this. So once you have that on top of there, you shove it back on as far as it'll go. And now you're ready to put your bottom bracket on. All right, so now you're gonna take your lower intercooler bracket and the factory bolts that it came off of, it. You're gonna install the rear one first, just a few threads. We're gonna go through our new bracket here and install. So get that one started. And then the back of this bracket has a slot here. So you can take this, put it through the bolt, and then pull it forward. And this is the point where you're gonna wanna shove it onto the intercooler bushing. So we'll push that on there. It's gonna be a tight squeeze. There you go. So now that that's on there, we'll take our front bolt, put it through here, and get it started a little bit. There we go. Now we'll take our 15mm socket and zip these in there. Now at this point, you can remove your jack that's supporting the body and put the weight back on here before we put that body mount bolt in. So now that you have these two bottom bolts tightened, you can take your 15mm ratcheting wrench and put it in the top here and tighten this upper bolt. All right, so now that you have your lower and upper bolts tightened with your intercooler spacer in there, we're gonna install the lower bushing and the bolt that holds the body mount on. And we were using an 18mm socket for that. All right, so now that you have the rear brackets in and your front bracket all assembled, and we can now put the inner fender liner back in. Again, going in just like it was going out, you're gonna have to wrestle with it a little bit, but it is quite flexible. The hardest part is just getting these nut tabs above the metal tabs on the fender. They're kind of hard to see in there, but there's 4 of them sticking up. So you kind of gotta get one end started early. Now that that's up, we can start by putting these screws in with a 7mm socket. All right, so once you've got the clips installed here, you can put the remaining clips into your fender liner, and then you put this one Christmas tree clip back up into the front here, and then you're ready to put your skid plate on and your front bumper and finish up the install, and then you have your new high clearance body mount so you can fit larger tires. And when you're doing the install, just reference the installation instructions for all of your torque specs and anything like that in more detail. Again, this is just a general instructional video just to kind of show you the steps and get your eyes on the vehicle and show you how we do it all. So thanks for watching.